Let us now start our day with a rather critical topic for today's age and time, a net zero world. And to talk about this key subject, we have an expert here. Our first speaker for the day is Namrata Rana, co-author of the book Shift, Opportunities for a Net Zero World. An alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, Namrata works with governments, companies, and NGOs on net zero transition and green jobs. Shift is the second book she has co-authored on the topic. The first book was titled Balance, Responsible Business for the Digital Age. Today, as she joins us for a keynote address, she will delve deeper into the transition that companies need to make to strive towards a net zero and circular economy. Joining her on stage after her keynote address will be Vasudevan Rangarajan, India lead for Edelman Global Advisory. May we have you on stage, please, Namrata?
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here this morning with all of you. I want to just begin by saying that writing is something that I do to actually just express and understand what exactly is happening in the world of sustainability. For all of us who've stayed in Delhi, winter is a terrible time. So we are all coughing away, looking at the air and complaining about it. The weather begins to change with Diwali and it continues, and now we are in February. Thankfully, we can see the sun, we can see the sky, we can see the flowers and feel thankful to be in Delhi. But a month back, we would have said, my God, why are we here, right? And sustainability to me means just that the world around us is changing, and it's changing in a dramatic, unprecedented way. There are many, many reasons why people attribute to the things that are changing. So the unseasonal rainfall, too much rain, bad air, lack of water, environmental issues such as degradation of soil. These are all things that concern all of us at various points in time. So they don't concern us every single day. They concern us when our lifestyle gets impacted. So say, for example, if I catch a cold in winter, it's like, my God, this air is terrible. If it didn't impact me, we wouldn't really be thinking about it that much. If the food that we eat doesn't taste as nice as we think it should, we'll then say, where did we get it from? But otherwise, it doesn't really impact our lives, right? So sustainability is just a word that is thrown about by a lot of people and by a lot of brands. And people in this room also contribute to many of these conversations. Because if you watch television, almost 80% of TV advertising now talks about contribution to society in some form or manner. Every brand keeps saying that we are good for the world. We are good for the world in different ways. Either we are contributing to education, healthcare, better lifestyle, or just the fact that we are doing something so out of the ordinary that something else can get impacted in a very positive way. Now, this is different from the way things used to be just 10 years back, where brands used to talk about product, price, place, and promotion. So where did sustainability come into the fray? It came into the fray because people started realizing that a product actually has significant impact on the world itself. So a product is what is inside the product, what it is actually made of. A product is the impact that it has on society, so the outside part of it. So the product is what we do with it and how it impacts the world. But there's also the third aspect, which is beside, right? So when we walk with a product, we actually talk about it. It can have significant impacts and influence people in different ways. So that influence is where a lot of you operate. It's about reputation, it's about perception, it's about how people absorb a brand into their everyday life. Sustainability impacts all three aspects. So what we say, how we say it, how we use a product, where does it go after use? All that matters. The consumption economy was fundamentally about buying a product and using it. Many companies all across the world focused on manufacturing in areas which were cheaper. So we talked about globalization. So we could then benefit from the profit that you could generate by manufacturing in a cheaper location and selling it in a country or a location where the price could be higher. So that was the profit margin. No one really considered the fact that it could have a significant impact on carbon emissions. Because the minute you start shipping things around, no matter what you produce, which is really, really sustainable, really good for the world, if you ship it around, there is a carbon impact. And that is what needs to be considered. So when we start saying that something is green, it is sustainable, it's great for you, we need to dig deeper. What exactly are we communicating? Who are we communicating to? And how are we communicating it? Because greenwashing is actually an offense now. So if you're saying that you're greener than what you are, if you're just talking and not doing, then that's going to impact your lifestyle, your communication capabilities, your firm's reputation, because then you would have put your full force behind something that is not necessarily true. So to me, the net zero transition is one about making a change in lifestyles, in brands, but it is also about saying the right things and doing the right things. Thank you so much.
Hello. Well, thank you so much, Namrata, for that, and that was a really interesting, we would say, teaser trailer and a tip of the iceberg into what is clearly a very complex topic. And for everyone over here, if you haven't read the book, highly recommend that you pick up a copy. It's essential reading for anyone who really wants to get into what ESG is, what the implications are for you, for companies, and for society in general. But Namrata, you spoke about this shift towards ESG that all companies are doing, and I'm going to try and get a little provocative here. It's an early morning. I'm sure everyone would like a little bit of a verbal coffee or verbal caffeine, so to speak. Most companies now have ESG aims. They've got sustainability aims. Unfortunately, most of those aims are, we will be net zero by 2047, 2050. It almost sounds like the CEO and the board are saying, it's not our problem. Let the next CEO and the next board take care of it. Is India Inc. Doing enough? Is it doing it fast enough? What do you think?
So, see, let me give you the long answer to this, which is the fact that we are in the biggest transformative shift of our times. The biggest transformation since the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was based on the fact that we could do things faster and cheaper and ship things around. It was based on our ability to harness energy. Now the energy, the sources of energy themselves are what is causing a lot of carbon emissions, and those carbon emissions need to come down, which means that the sources of energy need to change. If the sources of energy need to change, the way we manufacture things need to change, the way we ship things need to change, and it is not an easy transition, because at its fundamental level, this transition is about jobs. So the person at the petrol pump who gives you petrol now also needs to understand what does EV charging mean. Companies need to manufacture steel and cement through hydrogen or any other renewable forms of energy. That's again not an easy task. It means that people need to be trained, technology needs to be obtained, also new infrastructure needs to be set up. So if you suddenly start changing fuel, you need new infrastructure. Infrastructure that is supposed to last 40 years may now just last 15 or 20 years, so there is a cost attached to it. So when we start saying that our company is doing enough, we studied a lot of organizations. So my book is based on the studies that we've been doing, and we found that a lot of companies are mandated to report on environmental, social and governance issues. And that reporting has steadily been on the rise. Now the benefit or the demerit of communicating things externally is the fact that once you say it, you actually need to do it. So companies are certainly on this path, and they understand that it is not just a must do, it is not just a good to do, but it is now a must do. And that's really where they are going.
That was really a very interesting point that you make, Namrata, and of course for the audience, if you have any questions, please hold on to them. There will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions. But you know, you've spoken about this transition and that companies are on the path to transition for sure. But it's not an easy path either. That being said, this path also has some kind of, let's say, impact on consumers too. There are perceptions that environment friendly is also higher cost. You shift from a regular vehicle to an EV vehicle, there is a higher upfront cost. Sustainable inputs may result in products that have a slightly higher cost to consumers. So what can brands do to resolve this perception, to create demand for the products, or for more sustainability among the masses? Because the choice shouldn't really be between sustainability and price.
We are steadily on the path to creating a 1.5 degree world, which means that we will cross climate boundaries that we actually exist in. So the future is not going to be more of the past. Things are going to change. It will not be nice if we are in a 1.5 degree world and gradually moving towards 2 and 3 degrees. So we need to cut that down. The issue really is that if we don't do anything, if companies don't do anything, then the risk of inaction is very, very high. Banks all across the world are now saying that we will not give you funds if you don't have a climate plan, if you are not talking about decarbonizing, if you are not actually acting and have an aggressive roadmap towards looking at reducing your carbon emissions. So finance is the glue that holds the world together. That's what everything runs on. So if the climate changes, we need to be well prepared, and companies need to think far ahead. So yes, every single new product that gets made has a life cycle. It has a potential to do well or not do well. So companies will learn, products will come, they will evolve. Some will be pricier, some will not be pricier, right? If, there are different sectors that are actually evaluating new products and services. So they, for example, in the food sector, the minute we start saying something is more nutritious, you can actually charge a green premium on it. So if you say that it is sustainable, it is grown in a way that actually retains nutrients, there is a potential for charging a green premium. In clothing, it's not necessarily the case. There are times that you buy for the way that you look in a dress or an outfit, and you may not necessarily pay the green premium that somebody is asking for if you don't look good in that outfit, right? So there are behaviors that customers exhibit, and companies need to understand that. That's really what we need to drive, that how do we communicate the utility of a product to be able to charge the green premium so that the transition pays for itself. Otherwise, it will be a cost and it will be challenging for all companies to transition.
Would you therefore look at this shift, and again looking at it from a communication side, as essentially communications that is trying to nudge a certain behavior change in people? And what do you think would be the 2-3 things that communicators here should perhaps bear in mind while communicating this?
I think we need to look at the inside, outside and beside philosophy in addition to product, price, place, promotion. If we start looking at what's inside the product and being truly convinced that does that actually exist? What is the product made of? What are we trying to say? Instead of just taking things for granted. So it means digging deeper. If we start looking at outside, what happens when a product is used? How does it impact society? What are the positives and the negatives during utilization? That is something that communicators very seldom think about. They leave it at the fact that this product will be used like this, but it is not necessarily impact that actually registers. What will happen when the product is not used, right? Will it lie in a landfill? What is the end of life? So think back a few years, 10 years, 15 years, did we have these mountains of waste lying around in our cities? We didn't really have those mountains of waste. That's because everything that got used, there was a cycle of either reusing it, recycling it, repairing it, or doing something else with it. Which also means that there are new business models to be created when we start looking at outside a product. And that is something as communicators we need to think of and even educate brands that don't just think in a transactional way about the fact that the company created the product and gave it to the consumer and their responsibility is over. So if you think inside, you think outside, and then we talk about walking beside the brand in their journey to sustainability, I think we will have a new opportunity and a new field of play for communication professionals in the world of sustainability.
Well, it's often said that the path to sustainability for brands that everyone is walking on is paved with good intentions and lacks too much of action, but is compensated by painting a lot of things green. And we can revisit the elephant in the room, which is greenwashing. You touched upon it in your opening remarks, but as communicators here, a lot of times the challenge is to effectively communicate this journey of the company, of organizations and so on. When it comes to greenwashing and as communicators, how should one identify it internally? Because there is compliance is one thing and the new rules and so on, but there is a larger moral and ethical aspect to it, which of course far predates any of the regulations that have come in. So what should communicators guard against when it comes to greenwashing, even internally? Because there might be an instance where you have to push back internally and say that, look, this sounds good, but it sounds like greenwashing. What do you think communicators here, and what would the takeaways be to guard against greenwashing, and how to navigate this thorny issue of greenwashing within an organization? Getting outside is of course a next step.
As communicators, we need to, we may not necessarily be used to looking at data. So the data story on communication is frequently about what got said about a brand, what people appreciated about it, or what they didn't, and what are the new behavior patterns that we can work on, right? Typically it's that. But in today's world, we need to start following the data in a different way. For instance, we need to start saying that what are the impacts of a particular product on different kinds of aspects. So I'm not saying that we start getting into the chemistry of a product on how it was made, but certainly we need to start looking at the fact that what the product composition is. Are there any specific issues? So there is a lot of research that needs to be done before you actually accept a mandate to say that can we say something. So the questioning is absolutely critical. More than that, we also need to start monitoring the fact that are there any kinds of issues that people are exhibiting at the moment. So in a AI driven world, and why I'm talking about this is that AI is going to accelerate many, many things. It can accelerate the good and AI can accelerate the bad. So there will be instances where you're also working for digital companies. Now, take an example of a behavior pattern that got exhibited and there was an AI bias and it got accelerated. So in those kind of circumstances, you need to be very, very proactive. It's not as if that, a one-time communication will solve the problem, but you need to start thinking of following the data and solving live everyday issues and problems for customers. That's really something that will help you prevent greenwashing, because many times the intent may be good, but consumers may use it in a very different way. You don't really know what will happen when it's out there. In an accelerating world, anything can happen. So to be able to actually work with conviction that you're on the right path, you need to show intent and action with speed. And that's really what I think we should be doing.
Well, it's always good to start a communications journey by asking a question. And that perhaps is very true when you communicate sustainability. I mean, you actually need to ask the right questions to see whether the actual impact is happening or not. But you also touched upon the fact that all companies have got a sustainability plan in place. All companies are talking sustainability. But it also turns out that all companies are saying exactly the same thing, right? All of them have got the same SDGs that they're focusing on, the same kind of activities that they're doing. What it basically means is that there is a lot of clutter. Everyone is at the same level, so to speak. What therefore, as communicators, should we take away as, that these are table stakes and these are the things that we perhaps need to do or say to stand out? For people to take notice of us, or for people to actually recognize us for the good that we are doing, and it shouldn't seem that we are all part of a herd going in a certain direction. So as communicators, what really should we do to break out of this clutter?
Excessive communication is also a challenge many times in being seen as a brand that is responsible. So the minute you start only saying it, okay, and not follow through with action, that's when the challenges actually begin. And it seems like clutter because a lot of companies are just saying it, or brands are just saying it and maybe not following it deeper. So I think to break from the clutter, there needs to be consistency intent followed by consistency of action year after year after year, and measurement of impact, and only then do we communicate. So many times organizations have been in a hurry to actually say that, I will reach net zero by X date, net zero by Y date. And then they found it very challenging to actually achieve it, which is, the reality of today's world. We sort of try to see that, everybody's saying it, so I should say it too. Many times it can have different kinds of repercussions, because what you say at a corporate level may translate into something very different at a product level. So when we start communicating product versus when we start communicating brand reputation, they're two entirely different things. The product will have functional benefits. The product can also genuinely talk about sustainability impacts. It can talk about repair, reuse, recycle. It can talk about what happens after the life cycle of use and the fact that the materials are different. When we start talking corporate reputation at an aggregated level, things become very different. So we need to start being a little more careful that the sustainability report of a organization is an aggregate of all the products that it may have. So one or two products that are certainly more sustainable may not translate into the 80 other non-sustainable products being part of the portfolio of an organization. So we need to dig deeper, look at facts, and not necessarily get swayed by the fact that it's just good to do, sounds nice, and then we'll see later.
Well, always actions speak louder than words, and I think that a very important point that you made is one shouldn't jump the gun on communicating sustainability. It's better to do more and then talk about it, rather than talk more and then be accused of greenwashing and not doing enough and not actually translating what you're saying on the ground. But apart from communicators, of course, there are students in the crowd here, and well, the youth voice has been rather instrumental in advancing the agenda of sustainability. So for the students in the crowd here, if there was one key takeaway that they should take from this conversation that can perhaps guide them as future decision makers, future communicators, what would that be?
For students, I'd just like to say that you're the generation that is going to get impacted by the changes that we are going to see around the world. So for you, everyday decisions matter. And those everyday decisions in your corporate life, in your personal life, in almost every aspect of your career is going to impact the world and how that world transitions. So our generation really was about the consumption generation, and we didn't really think about anything more than consuming a product and looking at its functional attributes. Now there's way more to think about. So all I really want to think of, what all of you to think about is the fact that let's not just think green, but act green in everything that we do.
Well, time to act a little more green, and I would invite questions from the audience. Please do raise your hand. I will call on you, and do state your name and the organization that you're from. Opening the floor. Please.
So I'm Dhruv from ABNB.
Maybe we could get a mic too.
Hello ma'am, this is Dhruv from ABNB. I have a question from a communication point of view. While consumers are going up behind brands with a purpose, you also mentioned that it impacts us more when we are personally impacted. Brands who are trying to do some work in terms of showcasing that they are with a purpose, they are working towards the purpose of sustainability. The subject is little complex. And you mentioned data. So how do I break this complex subject matter data into something meaningful for consumers and build affinity for my brand? So that's the question that I have from a communication point of view.
You want to give a little more context to that?
Well, let's break it down a little, and do correct me if I'm trying to oversimplify things, but sustainability is complex. The benefits of sustainability on consumers is also something that may not be apparent right at the face of it. There at times can also be a cost that consumers pay for that sustainability. So how does one break down something as complex as a sustainability benefit and the net positive impact on a consumer to the consumer themselves? How do we communicate this sustainability journey, or rather the sustainability benefit to a consumer in a better way? I hope I've got that.
Perfectly
Right.
clear. Thank you so much.
I think the way that we sort of look at it is the fact that sustainability need not be an external package to the product. If sustainability is inbuilt, perhaps we will find it easier to talk about it as a functional benefit. I give the example of food very often because it is a functional benefit that you have better nutrition, and you're convinced about the fact that it can come from a reliable source. You're able to pay that extra. There is also the believability in that. Many times I go back to the Edelman Trust Barometer, and that's really something over the past few years we've consistently seen the fact that consumers want to actually invest in brands that actually do good for the world. If they don't do good for the world, then they don't really trust that brand. And for me, just somebody saying something is here now and forgotten 5 minutes later, because there is so much of a clutter. Unless I see it as a functional benefit, it doesn't really register in the long run.
Well, what I hear you saying is that again, the functional benefit of sustainability to the consumer needs to be better articulated, because the overall benefit is perhaps well understood.
It needs to exist for it to be articulated.
It needs to exist, of course. To begin with, it needs to be
It needs to exist.
Yeah, right. I hope that that answered your question. Call upon the gentleman there, please.
Thanks, Namrata. I like the way you put sustainability into the product part of the 4 Ps, marketing. My name is Sandeep Nath, and I am the founder of the Renewalism movement. And we work on organization culture using 3 Ps, which are people, purpose, and process. Now, where would you fit ESG into people, purpose, or process? Or would it work on all those 3? Does parameters of ESG go into a KRA of a person? Do they get into client-centric processes? Do they guide how the organization is driven by spirit? Thanks.
Absolutely. So unless sustainability metrics feature into KPIs of people all across the board, they will never ever get done. Typically, KPIs in organizations have been, and in fact, corporate balance sheets have always focused on what you sell, what was the cost of selling a product, and that was your profit. But the externalities never got accounted for. So say, for example, if we start saying that you need to now buy more organic cotton, or you need to buy a material that is easier to recycle, it needs to be in the KPI of the sourcing manager. If it is not in his KPI, he or she will always buy the cheapest material possible, which may be actually really bad for the environment. So that becomes a critical part in your processes, what those processes need to be, how people need to implement them, and the fact that all this needs to be aligned with corporate purpose. So the corporate purpose otherwise will be a nice mission and vision statement, and by the end of the year you will check back and find it never ever got implemented.
I mean, great point you make. I mean, what I hear you say is that instead of, and unfortunately till now, ESG may have existed on the periphery of business, it now needs to be brought into the core of business, into the core of decision making in business, and KPIs for that may have to be set, of course, realistically. I mean, one doesn't, one has to always look at balancing all aspects, but sustainability and sustainable choices, whether it is in sourcing, whether it is in business processes, whether it is in business decision making and future strategy, needs to be factored in right at the very middle of business, rather than sitting on the periphery of it and being looked at as an afterthought. I hope that.
I guess the only question is,
please.
is it happening? Are you auditing it?
These things are already happening. There are standard guidelines on compliances that are there for all companies. I mean, for almost all large organizations necessarily need to report on these things. There are about 500 different compliances around business responsibility all across the world. There are 1,114 distinct matrices as on 25th October 2023, and these are counting. When I began monitoring this, there were just 210 years back. So people are realizing that metrics matter, and everything that cannot be put into financial reporting gets put into non-financial reporting. So ESG is just an acronym. It's like somebody woke up some morning and said, ye environment hai, ye social hai, ye governance hai, that's it. But at the core, at its intent, it's really about the things that never got counted in the past. Because if you've ever studied economics, it's all about, land is free. You only factor in certain kinds of things. And you also there's an economic term that says ceteris paribus, which means things remain the same. In a 1.5 degrees world, things will not remain the same. The future will not be more of the past.
Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, I think we are running out of time, but I'm sure you would have a lot more questions, and Namrata, I'm sure you'd be very happy to engage with the audience here over coffee and over the next couple of hours and through the day. But thank you so much. Clearly, of course, ESG, while being a complex topic with many different ramifications, has got a communications aspect to it, which is a very important communications aspect, which is not just external to consumers, but also internal as part of how an organization shapes the way in which it functions and the way in which it shapes its own future. But thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for these very, very valuable insights. And of course, for the audience, I cannot stress this anymore. Please do get the book if you can. It's available outside, and it's also available online. Essential reading if you would like to start, or for that matter, progress on your sustainability journey, not just for yourself as a communicator, but also as a leader within your organization. So thank you so much once again, Namrata, and thank you all for being such a great audience.
Thank you very much.
Big hand, please.
Thank you, Namrata, for sharing your insights with us here today.